And Oklahoma is a unique space in terms of the number of African American towns that were established. Some suggest upwards of 50 African American towns between 1924 and 1928.
The NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was formed in 1909. Since then, they have been fighting for the rights of minorities, especially African Americans. The NAACP is known for their great performance in courts defending cases of segregation, workplace discrimination, and voting rights discrimination. The most savage and brutal example of white supremacy was a lynch mob. In 1919, the NAACP published a landmark report, 30 Years of Lynching in the United States. The report was the foundation used to end this brutal form of political and economic terrorism. The next largest impact by the NAACP was in 1954. The NAACP litigation director Charles Hamilton and his legal counsel Thurgood Marshall fought 26 cases before the Supreme Court, none more important than Brown v. the Board of Education. This case is one of the major legal landmarks guaranteeing the right to equality in an American society. Education is the key to full citizenship. Brown v. the Board of Education was one of the biggest court cases at the time, and it was a major factor in breaking down segregation. Also during this time, the NAACP pushed African Americans towards the arts to express themselves. This time of art allowed African Americans to truly find their worth in society. It also brought many creative minds to the public eye, such as Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, and Jacob Lawrence, whose painting is shown here. In 1965, President Johnson passed the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts, and the NAACP was a major part in both of those passing. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 provided direct federal enforcement to remove literacy tests from ballots of African American voters, as they were used to discourage African Americans from voting.
There is no constitutional issue here. The command of the Constitution is plain. There is no moral issue. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country. I have not the slightest doubt what will be your answer. But the last time a president sent a civil rights bill to the Congress, it contained a provision to protect voting rights in federal elections. That civil rights bill was passed after 8 long months of debate. And when that bill came to my desk from the Congress for my signature, the heart of the voting provision had been eliminated. This time, on this issue, there must be no delay or no hesitation or no compromise with our purpose.
In 1989, the NAACP provided a silent march in Washington, D.C. as a protest to the Supreme Court decisions of affirmative action and minorities set-asides. The march was inspired by the 1917 New York City Silent March protesting unfair voting rights. More than 100,000 participants dressed in black and white marched in a row of drummers to the U.S. Capitol. After the 2000 presidential election, the NAACP received numerous complaints about voter irregularities in Florida. On January 10, 2001, the NAACP joined other organizations to file a class action lawsuit on behalf of thousands of voters against many Florida officials for unfair voting practices.
My pictures of the 2000 election took you right into the center of a tsunami.
Your guy got the most votes. The problem is he won't be president.
The whole country kind of paused for a while.
This is an extraordinary moment for our democracy.
Tight, tight, tight.
It was probably the wildest political ride I've ever been on.
Things are unlikely to settle for quite some time.
I've liked covering elections is because I like how crazy it gets.
Shall immediately begin a manual recount.
I think election 2000 created a lot of resentment in the country.
In the 21st century, the NAACP sees corporate America as the third act for the equality movement, with racial and ethnic equity, empowerment, and inclusion to the next frontier of private sector.